Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bogey Men Golf Podcast, and it is episode 2 of our full swing review series. So, in this episode, we're recapping episode 3 and episode 4. So, we're focusing on Ian Poulter and Joel Dahmen, and to break down this episode, we're joined by Colmán Stanley from Balls.ie. Colmán, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks for coming on. So, listen, I think we'll probably dive straight into it. Episode 3 with Ian Poulter's episode. It's an interesting episode. Dave, let's go with you first. What do you make of Poulter? It gave a pretty good insight, I guess, in comparison to episode 1, where you got a very odd insight into JT and Jordan. You got a pretty good insight into Poulter and where he's at in his career.
I was thinking about it. I was like, if I was Ian Poulter and I look back at that episode, what would I think about, or do I think it would accurately portray me or my image and how I wanted to come across? And like, what did we find out about him? He is a family man. I think that's one of his big things. He's extremely flashy. He's at pains to point out that he does live a life both sides of the Atlantic, and as with everyone I think who is even remotely connected to the world of professional golf, they all have private jets at which they spend their time jetting around the world, because that is the only way you clearly travel when you play golf. So for everyone out there who's going to take up golf in the next while, like, you will be flying private pretty soon. So make sure you hop on that bandwagon. Poulter, did anything surprise me about him that I didn't know? I don't think so. I always feared when I saw him in the preview, I was really thinking, is this just going to be Ian Poulter, like playing a role of Ian Poulter in the Ian Poulter show, as opposed to a camera following him around and finding out really what he was like? And unfortunately, I think we got the former rather than the latter. I think he always extols the virtues of playing in Augusta, etc., while kind of looking at you side-eyed in the camera going, will I go to live? And trying to be, in a way that Phil always tries to be, like the smartest person in the room. And is like his way of, I suppose, would you like to be Ryder Cup captain? And he's like, there's a bear shit in the woods. And it's like what? How is that a clever response? Like, I don't think that we ever got anything beyond the really superficial Ian Poulter across the whole thing. Like, and it's funny for effectively an hour long episode that we only got the Instagram version.
Well, I thought he came across okay, but yeah, I think we didn't get that much of his real personality. As you said, it was a bit superficial, but I don't blame him for going to the live tour. Like, he's old, his game's not there really, so might as well make a bit of dough.
Or you get pretty good insight, or a pretty honest insight, when you look past the Instagram version of Poulter, that like he's coming to the end of his competitive career. He's in his 47 now or something like that, and you can see that he has to try and qualify for the bigger events. That's most notably seeing where he's playing the WGC, the match play. And whether or not that throw in other clubs was staged, I think he's very aware of the fact that the cameras were with him that week, and to throw his clubs in the locker room afterwards was, it was definitely a little bit of the showman in Poulter. But I thought it was very, very good and very well edited when Poulter or someone was saying that he's unbeaten in Ryder Cup singles in match play, and then just proceeds to just lose every single match. It's a nice little bit of, like, the editor or someone took a little bit of karma just to bring him down a peg or two, which, look, it's a bit of a chuckle. My wife watched this episode with me, and we watched episodes 1, 2, and 3 in quick succession. And one of her favorite episodes was the third episode, not because she thought Ian Poulter was a particularly nice or likable guy, but because he was a bit of a character. She said he was a bit of a dick, and that was cool to watch as a TV program because he was a personality. And definitely episode 3 was a good turning point within this series overall of who people are. And I think you got a good insight to what Ian Poulter probably is like week in, week out. Like, I think there's one seen, which I thought was very interesting, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, was when Pat Perez and and Poulter are standing on a tee box talking about each other's Instagram followers.
Yeah, the Instagram followers.
I think that's very funny because it's such a random thing for them to be talking about, that if you look at it, obviously with the context we have now of like all of these things were probably quite important when they were talking to Liv about drumming up promotion and support for their audience to go and follow Liv, and all of those things probably added to the value or the price tag that they put on when they were talking to the Liv guys. What do you think of that conversation within that context? But then also just the fact that they actually talk about that.
Well, Perez here has 174k followers on Liv, so I don't think he had too much pulling power. But he's a bit of a character now. In fairness to him, he's making the most out of his Liv anyway.
Dave, what do you think of when the clubs were thrown? I think that's, again, we're both probably quite cynical when it comes to it.
Yeah, we are. Are we overly cynical about it? Like,
I would say a small bit overly cynical. I mean, golf is a frustrating game. I've been there punching trees, like, you know what I mean, down in a Ballymoney golf club, you know what I mean. So I think there was a bit more riding on Poulter missing out on the on
Augusta,
on the Masters. So I kind of,
and it is his big thing, like his big tournaments outside of the Ryder Cup stuff, and he does love to go there. We know he has set up a few clandestine businesses on the side, setting up Augusta logoed hats and stuff like that. And I wonder always how that goes down with the membership as a business enterprise that he has set up on the side. I got the frustration. Now I don't know. Look, who knows what most locker rooms are like. I don't know of everyone we saw. There was a lot of disappointments and highs and lows and everything we saw across the 8 episodes. Don't think we ever saw anyone gone to that extent. I think it was Billy Foster was in the locker room at the time with Poulter's caddy, and Matt Fitz was sitting like the other side of the lockers, and he was just there on his phone giggling away to himself. So I was wondering, now, is that like the lads just going, oh, there, he's off now for the cameras? And I do think that there is a huge amount of frustration, yes, but is it a case that he was showing out for it? And look, with Ian Poulter, I think you always have to revert to the latter, unfortunately. Now, the other side of it is, I found the juxtaposition of him saying how much the Ryder Cup legacy means to him, and how much it means, and how much it means. And we heard this, like, that phrase so often. Whereas what really meant more to him than anything was money. And he ultimately didn't like the fact that he had to choose between the two. And I don't think any of them did, who were probably in that Ryder Cup realm, either playing or potential captaining, like Graham McDowell, Henrik Stenson, Sergio, Poulter, who've been very, very, very present from a Ryder Cup perspective over the past 12 years, even longer. And yes, they made the choice. They knew the choice, but while this was so important to him, it wasn't important enough. So at some point you have to stop saying that. You know, at some point you just have to own up and say, listen, it was so important. I knew what was going to happen, but I chose the money. Whereas you can kind of argue against it, or argue against the rationale or the reasoning that you're not going to be involved because you went to live, or you can accept the fact you went and your bed is made. You have now to lie in it, and there are upshots for everybody who have gone financially, but there are downsides. But they seem to really only want to focus on the benefits of the upside, but really kind of deny the downside, or their participation in the downside. And he does that. He just it's frustrating because the line doesn't change. The party line doesn't change from everyone who's gone. It's like, we should be allowed to play. We should be allowed to play. And you're just like, well, Now, I know things may change in the US over the coming while. Like, I think they have been looking a little bit more open to it. But in the context of the episode of Poulter, like the very much the Phil piece have been the smartest guy in the room. Very much, I should be allowed to, or who knows what's going to happen, knowing full well he's going. And I'd love to have known really at what point he had actually committed to live in the series. That would have been really interesting.
I'd say pretty soon after they asked him.
Yeah.
And he saw that it was going ahead for sure. I'd say a lot of them, like, you see that amount of money where your game is at.
Yeah. And he hasn't been playing well. Like, he really hasn't. It's not like it's not like Stenson who had the captaincy and had to leave that go. Or on the flip side, he was winning loads of majors, but then got the guaranteed offer. He was neither playing well, he would have been guaranteed a captaincy, but not within the next 6 years. So like he was in this weird limbo from a Ryder Cup perspective, that the next few would have been Stenson, Westwood, McDowell were certainly the three ahead of him. So like we're talking 8 years maybe before he got there. Now, whether that was a burning factor in his decision. Look, I'm just going to go now, take my money now, and I'll come back, and then I'll be welcomed with open arms. I wonder, was that the rationale?
I'd say he was ahead of GMAC in terms of captaincy. I'm not sure they do it by age, or do they?
No, there was. I think the reputation
that?
was, or sorry, the rumors around it were Stenson, Westwood, GMAC were the three, and then Poulter. I'm wondering, like, I think GMAC could be younger. Actually, he would be younger, but that was the way it was. It was starting to play out. Now, look, that's very much hypothetical, but were these considerations outside of the financial?
Yeah, it's a very interesting. It's an interesting one to discuss when he would have signed on with Liv and agreed to go as part of the series. But I think there were some very nice kind of light points and tension relievers throughout this episode as well, where, like you mentioned there, Colmán, you got the sense that he was a family man, and family is obviously very important to him. And I think for people that aren't big golf fans or are probably new to the game, it did a very good introduction of who he is, where he's from, and the fact that he wears fairly outrageous pants and dresses a certain way, and he was always a pretty out there character. I think then to transition that or contrast that to episode 4, when you have Joel Dahmen and his episode where he talks about playing at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, taking his shirt off and everyone going nuts and everyone having so much fun throwing beer onto the green, and then you get a phone call from the PGA Tour and you're in a lot of trouble. I think the opening scene of Poulter's episode, or the opening few minutes and the opening few minutes of Joel Dahmen's episode, you get a sense that these are two very different players from two very different aspects of life with very different priorities. And Joel Dahmen is kind of like the average guy. If Poulter is the private jets and that type of lifestyle, Joel Dahmen is he's your everyman, he's your journeyman.
The everyman thing though, was that like played up a bit too much? Like they really kept it going, like, and they wouldn't, you know what I mean, hit. I thought it might have been played up slightly too much. It's like, I think he does care a bit more than it's made out to be. Like, oh, I don't really care. Oh no, I finished like 6th.
Yeah.
Oh well. It's like, I think he did give a bit more of a shit maybe than what was made out to be. Like,
it was funny. I would have thought that only everyone said it. It was the theme, as in it was everyone said that he should be better than he is. I had a funny, like, kind of comparison between the two. Poulter thinks he has the ability to play like Dahmen or be viewed like Dahmen from a golfing perspective, and Dahmen thinks he has actually Poulter's level, as in he doesn't feel like he can break into a world top 10, and everyone around him is saying you are a top 10 player, whereas the only thing in Ian Poulter's head is that he's a top 10 player himself. Whereas you just had this guy who has so much confidence in himself, so arrogant, so or I suppose single-minded in his ability, and yet you have another guy on the other hand who has all of that ability that one guy thinks he have, but is kind of, I'm not going to say racked with doubt, but you kind of found that the evolution through the program, he or through the episode, he was like starting to believe it a bit more. And like in press conferences, it kind of came around to the idea of saying, well, yeah, maybe I really should be here. Despite everyone saying, Max Homa saying it, his caddy saying it, his family telling him, every player who was interviewed they're telling him he is a world top 10 player, and he's like, maybe I could be top 30 and I'd be happy with it. And then you just see it evolve from his performances in the majors, etc. I thought this episode, like, if you're going into like what are the things that, or what are the things that impact getting a player to where they are, be it family. And I think we got an insight into Poulter's family. It's just as that it's important to him. But really, in Joel Dahmen's episode, it broke down why these people are important to him, like why Geno is so important to him as a caddy, to have his best friend, effectively his best friend there. How it's so important to him to have his wife there, what his parents meant to him, certainly his mother, and the impact that had on him then. This was the first time we really got to dig under the hood of anybody in 3 episodes. So I would have loved that element of insight into Poulter, like really kind of get under the skin, but I don't think he'd ever let you in. Whereas Damon's a little bit more, I'm not going to say innocent, but maybe a little bit more vulnerable and open to that side of his life being brought out. And like the relationship to him and Geno Benali is just one of like sport's great joys, if you ask me.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good insight into the caddy player relationship, which was, some of those relationships, like if you look at the Matt Fitz and Billy Foster relationship as a player caddy, that's very much a professional agreement. And compare that to Geno and Joel, that's just 2 really good mates who just want to spend time with each other. And there's a professional aspect to it, but the fact that they grew up together, and like the letter that Geno wrote to Joe, basically begging to go out on tour with him and to live this crazy life. It's such a heartwarming story that if someone hasn't watched this series, this is the episode that I would tell people to watch first as a litmus test. Be like, watch this episode. If you like this is like the one that'll really get you into it. And it's a type of episode that I think if you're passing a TV and the PGA Tour's on, you'll try to have a look at the leaderboard and see how Joel Dahmen's doing, because it's such a heartwarming character that like you need someone to root for in golf, and he's someone that wins you over. Like the fact that he obviously got into the fact that his mother died of cancer, and then he himself got cancer years later, but also he was very open and honest about the impact that the death of his mother had on him when he played golf, and then just kind of fell away for a few years and then got back into it. Like that's all very real emotive stuff that happens to anyone and everyone. You don't hear too much about it, especially not at an elite level. So to see that people like him who have an incredible talent go through those types of struggles as well, and just make them all the more relatable, much more relatable, I guess, than getting on your private jet and taking a 40-minute flight.
He had some quality one-liners too. I loved it at the start, and it is the kind of self-deprecating humor that he has. And it's like, they were talking about these Justin Thomas, they're going to be top 10 players in the world. I'm not going to be that guy. And he's like, well, somebody has to be 70th best golfer in the world. So like, why not me? It's like, and he seems to be just very happy with his lot, like a very contented human, like drives a normal car, like going out, buying a kid's stroller for his soon to be born first child. And the novelty of that, and a real normal human touch when he actually goes to do it. It's not like someone's been sent off to buy it for him. He looks like he's driving a normal car, lives in a normal house, has friends around for beers in his back garden. It was like, this is the kind of guy that there could be some people, lads particularly, who'd look at this gone, I definitely could. I'm like him. in every facet, except for the fact that he's the best player in the world, one of the best players in the world, and then by extension believe that they could be playing on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I'd be intrigued, Colin, to get your thoughts on. I think the big turning point when it came to us as an audience realizing that, yeah, he's very self-deprecating about how good he is, but when it came to the US Open qualifier and he shot that opening 75, had a couple of white claws at the turn.
Yeah.
But you then get the sense that he goes, right, I'm going to click into gear here and perform. I think from what Dave was saying, that we were watching the episode up to that point going, geez, like he's one of us. Like I could be a professional golfer. And then you watch that sequence and go, no, I couldn't. Like I couldn't do that.
Well, there were memories of John Daly there, you know, chugging beers while on the course. Yeah, like just back on the Geno thing, like would he be better if he wasn't best mates with his caddy, if he did have, you know, a tougher caddy? I know, well, obviously he seems very happy, and Geno's is obviously a great guy, and he's obviously he takes happiness over being a better golfer. But just I think it's interesting maybe to think about that, like if he did have a harder caddy, maybe.
I was thinking about that, and Geno, while he's funny with him, like there was a couple of times where he really, like, I'm not going to say stuck the boot in, but he like did give him a bit of a chat, and funnily enough, he did react to it. But it was with the personality that Dahmen is like, does that only then come from someone that he inherently trusts? Like, and you're going into a little bit of pop psychology here, to be honest, but the relationship seems to do an awful lot more for him than plays against him in certain ways. Like, is he just a complete enabler?
Yeah, but in terms of his golf, if he's not performing as well as everyone's saying he should, you know, maybe he should get a new caddy. Like, I know obviously that sounds very heartless after watching that episode, but I think
it's funny you say that, because in that episode then he does go and get his top 10 in the majors and finally starts to break through, and you're just wondering, is it just a case of is it all on Joel, really, as in he has to take himself more seriously?
He missed the cut there at Riviera, so I don't know how he's doing at the moment. I guess there does need to be more responsibility on the player. It's obviously the caddy can only do so much, but there have been cases where a player changed the caddy, changed the coach, and they have. Are
you trying to break up the best couple in world golf? Is that it, Colmán?
Yeah,
that's what you're like.
The
highest point that we've got to with Full Swing. Colmán Stanley is like, nope, I'm not having it.
I'm just putting it out there.
Geno needs to go.
Just putting it out there. But no, Joel seems like a great guy. Like, I first kind of got an insight into him. He was on the Good show, their YouTube channel, and he did a round, and he's quite a small hitter. Like, you know what I mean? He certainly doesn't hit it long off the tee. Your man from Good, Micah, he was way out driving him, you know, and I was kind of shocked at that. Like,
he's fairly average when it comes to distance, but
in terms of distance, so he's obviously a very talented. Got a great short game. Obviously, we saw in the US Open when he holds that unbelievable putt, like on those greens as well, in Brookline, on such a tough course. It obviously suited him as well. You didn't need to be really long. You need to have a bit more guile about your game.
Yeah, I think to kind of put a bow on Joel Dahmen's episode, when he was obviously, he had a very, very good week at the US Open with the top 10 finish, and then it kind of you got a glimpse into the Matt Fitzpatrick story and the Matt Fitzpatrick journey, and I think that American Dreams episode 5, which we're going to get onto next week, is a very similar tone of episode to Joel's. I guess, Dave, if you had any kind of final parting thoughts on episode 4, what would they be? What's your elevator pitch for episode 4?
It's as close to real professional golf as you're going to get in this whole series.
Yeah, I thought the US regionals, the qualifying was.
That's it. You get an insight into when it doesn't go well, what happens. You have to go to qualifying. You have to. So that's the equivalent. Like those qualifyings happen
wearing
all
shorts
the time
as well. I thought that was, you know what I mean?
Exactly, and just a normal like going out to a tournament. That 2-day, the 36-hole qualifier to get to the US final qualifying. Those Monday qualifiers happen for every tour event. You'll have lads out there who are like, "Oh, am I going to show up for the second 36, or will I just have 2 beers and then go and shoot 65 and qualify for the US Open?" And it gives you an insight that not everyone does fly private. That there are issues in that play on golfers' minds outside of just making the cut. Because fucking hell, we have heard 5 million times. Apparently, if you don't make the cut at a PGA Tour event, you don't earn money. Did you know that? I was shocked. Couldn't believe it. But for me, this was the most, the easiest one to follow, the nicest story, the most relevant story to 99.99% of professional golfers.
Yeah.
So what were your key takeaways then, Colmán, just to wrap up episode 4? What's your
the regionals? As someone who follows golf, I didn't have an insight for those type of qualifying tournaments, so that was probably my favorite part of it. I do love Dahmen. I love his caddy partnership and all, but I think there a question there? Would his golf game be better if he had a more professional relationship with his caddy? But obviously a lot of respect to him. He values happiness over his maybe being the best golfer he possibly can. But there was an interesting point though, I think his wife made. She was saying once their kid comes, maybe he will start just to take it that bit more seriously. I think he does deep down though take it a bit more seriously than maybe. I think that's maybe slightly a bit of a front, just to be like, because I would do the same thing myself. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like, look, don't give a shit. 60s played, yeah. Like I wasn't even trying. Do you know what I mean? Me and the caddy drinking, like, you know what I mean? Maybe that's just me being really cynical.
Watching the episode, for me, I thought the self-deprecating probably got to be a bit much toward the end of it, where you're like, look, you're 70th in the world or whatever it is on the PGA Tour. You obviously have an incredible talent, and it's just jarring because I guess we talk to a lot of professional golfers at different levels who all have like a blinding self-belief that they are the best in the world or they can be the best in the world, and then you hear repeatedly from one of the best players in the world that you're like, I'm happy with where I'm at, and you're like, whoa, like that's not it's not the party line that you get from non-professionals. But it was a refreshing take. I think we might wrap it up there for this week's review of episode 3 and 4 of Full Swing. Colmán, thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure to chat to you, and enjoy the rest of the series.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on, lads.
On the tee, Jack Nicklaus.
This is the minute the millions around the world have waited for.
We will allow you to enjoy all of this. They are dancing in the pubs of Dublin. Harrington with an ace.
And we have a shining star at sunset. Rory continues his run to greatness. The return to glory.